Greetings, everyone. And by everyone, we begin with Lisa. Hello, Lisa. Can you hear me? I'm going to do a quick sound check just to make sure. And hello, Maya. Can you hear me?
Oh, and there's Maya.
Hello. Can anybody hear me?
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Lisa. Maya. Hey, Jason. Can you...
Oh, sorry.
Hello, puppy.
He hears you. I'm at home, obviously.
Is that your dog, Lisa?
It is.
Oh. Oh.
He's a little worried. He heard an unfamiliar voice.
Oh, and a male voice, too. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, I can hear. What's his or her name?
Jackson.
Hey, Jackson.
Jackson. Big white dog.
Good dog. Well, you can bring him on screen anytime you want.
Okay.
Jason, where are you today?
I'm in Australia on the Gold Coast.
Fantastic. I haven't been there for too long. I hope it's really, really warm and pleasant right now.
It is, actually.
I'm sure. I have some great photos of sunrise on the Gold Coast that I really enjoy taking. And Maya, how are you doing? Can you talk okay?
Yeah, I can talk.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, like this, I mean, maybe the voice may go down halfway through it, but I've talked my way through the day now, so it's either going to get it better or worse.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, this is a thing. Those of us in the North Country, we get to run the risk of serious illness. But down in the Southwest, hello, Vanessa.
Okay, let's see.
And hello, Jonathan.
I don't have sound.
And by the way, if at any point you feel that you would rather type than speak, please use the chat box. The chat box button is on the right bottom of the screen. So let's get started, if we can. And one of the things we wanted to accomplish at this point was we were taking a week of brainstorming, a week of ideas and thinking, and then bringing them more and more closely tied to reality. And so today's idea was to think about what shapes a Horizon report could take, or a successor to Horizon, what some new thing could look like, what could be. And so we've had a whole bunch of discussion about this. Vanessa, we can hear you, I think. And hello, Tom. And hello, Taylor. So let me ask, would you all like to take a few minutes and a few of us could go through the discussion so far and summarize?
I can't hear you, though.
Well,
I can hear you.
I'm not sure how to change the audio settings on Zoom. Hello, Jonathan Kornberg. You might want to pop out and pop back in again, Vanessa, and see if it makes a difference. Hello, Mark. So
Hi, Brian.
let me ask, would you all like to start off by having us recap some of the highlights from the day, or would you like to dive in with your own ideas about where this could possibly go?
I think it would be helpful to recap a little, Brian, since there was so much going back and forth.
Oh, I can certainly do that if you all don't object. But let me just give a quick shout out to my friends here, to Maya, to Tom, and to Taylor, who've been doing so much work in organizing FOECast and done just tremendous amounts of work behind the scenes. In fact, just a few minutes ago, Tom published a blog post on the FOECast site. Maya organized today's quick poll, and Taylor just seems to be owning Squarespace.com just behind the scenes. So let me, I'll mention a few of the things that have come up in terms of the different forms and shapes this could take. One of them is the idea of having some kind of continuous research going on. And that could be literally continuous, as in, say, a living document, a wiki, for example, where people are able to either add to or track data about either current events or about forecasts. The second is to punctuate that with individual presentations or stories. And it could take any number of forms. And we really haven't picked out any of those forms yet, i.e. a video or a virtual reality level or a podcast or whatever. We haven't really pinned that down yet. But that dynamic's pretty strong. The idea of having a continuous shape, something that goes on for a long time, or something that's punctuated. Again, like any other report, like the OCLC horizon scanning, or like the horizon report. So that's one interesting dynamic. Then we had a few other really fun ideas. Stephen Downes came up with the idea of imitating Edge. If you haven't seen it, Edge is this really provocative, deep website. The idea is they try and explore the intersection of the sciences and the humanities. And the real emphasis is on what the humanities can learn from the sciences, I think. One of the things they'll do is they'll have a question, a really, really deep, provocative seminar-level question, and then they'll run with that for a certain period of time, say a few weeks. And by run, they'll signal a whole bunch of great scholars, thinkers to weigh in and contribute. Let me just, before I go further, let me just ask, if you're not talking right now, if you could mute yourself. I'm hearing a strong machine noise, like someone mouthing over a microphone. Now that I've humiliated that person, it's gone away, which is fine. So the idea would be for whatever form this takes, say FOECast.net, to have something like a monthly question where we would say, is Roxanne the actual princess of North America? I mean, no, that wouldn't be quite. But to ask a question like, say, for example, is the LMS going to continue to structure institutionally based online learning, for example, and then give people time to run with that? So that's another idea, that kind of edge-style question. And you can shape those questions towards the future. Another idea that came up is what Phil called the reverse funnel idea, which is to say, you can start with a general conversation like we're doing now with hundreds of people involved, and then narrow it down until you have a few people shaping out a publication or a product of some kind. Phil's idea was to reverse that and start with a cadre of experts, to have them do few training work, say 14 people around a room like us right now, and then to produce something which would then be handed off to a slightly larger group, a medium-sized group that could then work on it, flesh it out, and then take this to a larger community. So that's another shape that this has been discussed. I'm going on at great length here, trying to summarize some really rich thoughts. Let me ask the rest of you who have been working through the Google Doc, beyond the ones I've just mentioned, are there other forms and shapes that really impressed you? I'm saying the Google Doc, that's where most of the talk has been happening, but also if they appeared in blogs or in Twitter or anywhere else.
Well, Brian,
Yeah.
today we talked about, and Jonathan's going to set up a place on the web page where new, innovative, or creative ideas would be posted weekly or daily, or whenever somebody really comes up with something new. That it would be an ongoing alert, say, on the web page where we could keep up with things that are happening, new things that are happening.
So like a kind of ongoing horizon scanning where as a new development hits, this would be flagged in the site?
Yes. And then if anybody has an example, or if anybody's trying it or using it, it would be right there, like kind of cutting edge, though. Maybe, some things that others might not have even heard of yet, and that's the first place it goes. So right there, right then and there.
Really neat. That's a really neat idea. And that goes back to that earlier continuous development, ongoing things.
Sort of a live document.
Yeah, it sounds like that. And hello, everyone who's joined in the last few minutes, to Peter and Ruben, and welcome back, Vanessa. Which other forms and shapes for such a project struck you as especially intriguing or valuable?
So Brian, maybe I'll kind of like move that
Please.
a little bit higher on a higher level, but
Okay.
I think appears to me continuous, and it could be my own reflection in some of the thoughts already expressed in the document. But the idea of something that will be very driven by timing, right? The timing of things and sort of events and technologies.
Mm.
And sort of conversations, and and participatory at the same time, which is great. But on the other hand, the need for something really deep, which usually takes a much more opportunity for reflection and a deeper thinking and a deeper conversation and kind of really understanding its sort of intended and perhaps even unintended consequences. And I think it appears to me that there is this tension about something that is very current and how we can be a space and create a conversation around that, which I think is great. And I think some of the wiki and the sites and some of the other ideas can really bring this forward. But I feel that oftentimes these are driven, right, by a sort of the interest of a particular school, could be, or individual, or and it takes actually being able to step away from just a single perspective and look at them through a sort of a deeper reflection, that you can get to that sort of next level of thinking. And hence sort of, I think, the different forecasting models, sort of the discussion around them is because I think there's something within the community that needs that. And I feel that also kind of, sort of, to not get too complicated here, it's kind of, the matter between technology and pedagogy, right? So technology is something that appears, and then things start to kind of get excited, we start to generate ideas and things around it. But how does this actually impact learning on a very pedagogical framework? It's something that actually takes time for us to really be able to say and to be able to really share, because it's just these, yes, there's some educated guesses, and we as practitioners have, are pretty good at them, in some areas, and very poor in others. But I think for me, this continues to be a tension of sort of these things. And I think it's going to be good to have a conversation around how do we address that.
Well, I'd suggested in the Google Doc the other day about the idea of having like blue sky projects, which are aspirational and which pull people along, but also having a separate track of what we can call mature, or a roadmap of things that people are already doing at scale that then other institutions can learn from. And so that you'd have these two different tracks. I mean, it's sort of the Gartner hype curve is one way of doing it, but how can we make that a lot more practical than the Gartner hype curve? Because basically what Gartner says is, hey, look, everybody's doing this and everybody's doing that. And it's really kind of this survey of disconnected, and they just this broad brushstroke. But do you know who's got that AR or VR at that plateau already or not, and that sort of thing? You don't, because that information isn't really anywhere in the Gartner reports that I'm aware of. And I'm not even sure how they collect that data and assimilate it, other than, tea leaves or something. But I hope it's more than that. But I mean, the idea is we have connections to a broad range of institutions where we have, again, the Verizon report tried to do this with the projects that they always put in there, but they were all that was always kind of a haphazard afterthought of the process. But what if we have that train going all the time and saying, okay, so Kyle up at Abilene Christian is doing this, this, and this, and they've actually gotten this to work, and so on and so forth. And here, and if you want to talk to Kyle, here's the process by which they managed to get this from aspirational to practical, that sort of thing. I think that would be immensely useful to people.
Can I jump in too here?
Please.
Yeah.
I had the good fortune last night of listening to Chris Steedy from Harvard, who does the emerging technologies there. And last
Hmm.
night Chris was talking about, the problem that those of us in this practitioners in this field is we start with the technology rather than with the problem or situation that the technology is supposed to solve, because we're so enthusiastic about the tools. So one way I think we can think about going forward is to, along with thinking about pedagogy, is thinking about what instructional or learning problem that we're really concerned with, and then use that as a starting point before we leap into our enthusiasm about a pedagogical approach or a tool. So, just a
Well,
thought.
that's an important thought. I mean, that takes us back, if I can, to some of the earlier discussions, which is this project about the future of technology, the future education technology, the future of education. Then you peel education apart. All right, is it about education? So you think institutions, teachers, curricula, and so on, or is this about learning, which really cuts against the grain in a very, very different way? So then that really forces us to think about this. If I could quickly, let me just make sure I follow all this, because there's you guys are just a fountain of great ideas. If I walk you back from Peter to Tom, Tom is talking about this distinction between the Gartner level huge picture. In the Google Doc, Veronica Armour refers to this as the Earth seen from space, which is a great image. That level, all the way down to the individual level of somebody at Abilene Christian University or somebody at NYU doing this one particular project. So you have to wonder, as a consumer or as a user of this, would you then, are these different ways into the project, whatever it is, that you might want to start at the macro level, or you might start at the micro level, work back and forth. And then if we can take this back further to Lisa, and both Lisa and Tom, I mean, talking about this idea of unintended consequences and where things could go next. That's another key part. We run the risk of being too presentist. I think, Taylor, you're talking about this as well, that we can focus on these current events, but lose track of how they would unfold as they get deployed, as they get consequences that we can foresee and further on. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to summarize and bring together all these strands, because this is terrific stuff. Please keep going, everyone. Are there more shapes? Are there more forms that you'd like us to consider? Or do you want to dive back into one of these?
I could add one little layer that's coming to mind now.
Please.
Which it always takes about 5 minutes, and then the neurons start firing, and then I feel like we've hit that point finally. I've become really interested in the decentralized nature of things. For those that saw, I've been diving deep into the blockchain rabbit hole lately, and I could see a lot of these pieces converging in a sort of crowdsourced based system of some sort that actually allows for that breadth and that sort of the depth of gaining perspectives from a lot of places. Some sort of just simple voting scheme where this gives you the temperature of what people are really interested in the moment, maybe out of 10, 20 items or whatever. Allow that sort of crowdsourced voting to sort of push things to the top of the sort of broader landscape interest level, and then maybe that then creates that one or two the one or two things that then gets that added level of maybe taking that higher top level view, and then that can sort of just continually circulate. So it's the community is always driving, and the decentralized nature is always driving what's of interest, but then that allows the folks that have the time and resources to really invest in those bigger ideas that seem to constantly surface to the top. To then, that's the piece I don't have as much experience in, but then allow that system to create the deeper dive on those ones that funnel to the top.
Let me ask two quick questions. And by the way, Taylor, are you in Denver now?
Yes.
And are you sending us snow? Are you sending it east in our direction?
We're finally getting it in the mountains and not in Denver, which is how it's supposed to work. And yes, I think that's how it's working. So okay. Yeah, feels right.
I'm in Michigan in the United States, and it was 60 degrees Fahrenheit today, and it's going to be 20 tomorrow or so. So I just want to check on that. First question, just for everybody, let me make sure I'm right on this. My sense overall is that all the discussion thinks that whatever FOECast becomes, whatever it creates, should be participatory, should be community driven. Is that right? I mean, or am I missing? Okay. I mean, I'm worried because that's my sense personally, and I don't want to be too biased. I don't want to impose my own thinking. Second, I just had this. I'm not a graphic person, but I just had this great graphic image based on what you were talking about, Taylor, which is the atmosphere of our ability to start from the stratosphere, or actually the troposphere, and see everything else, but then move our way down to individual instances and individual cases. That sounds like, does that make sense as a visual? Tom is throwing pink worms at us. Tom, you're going to have to explain this to people.
Well, I just put the whole story up. I'm scratching the back of my memory.
Oh,
but
Lifeline,
Robert
yeah.
Robert A. Heinlein wrote a story just on the eve of World War II where he discussed time travel in the context of long pink worm existential threads, and the idea being that we have these pink worms all over our existence, looking backwards and forwards and sideways at the same time. So anyway.
The metaphor that I was thinking about was one from a because we're all working at a time of the decay of the industrial model of education and the rise of a new one. And there was an image from philosophy of the pregnant widow, where the old man is gone, but the child that replaces him is not yet born. You know, so that's what sticks in my mind.
I like that.
19th century Russian philosophy there, you know.
Let me see if I can find this. There's a Gramsci quote which says the crisis. How does this go? The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old order is dying and a new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. That sounds also quite Russian, although it's Italian.
Yeah, well, I'm not. I unfortunately, I see an awful lot of. I'm not a big believer in revolution, in the sense that it just doesn't tend to happen. You end up regressing back to the earlier form after a period of chaos, and so think Russian Revolution, and within 10 years you had another czar in the form of Stalin. And with but that I think that if you get too far outside of the zone, so to speak, you get too far ahead of culture, that it will snap back. And so a lot of this futuring effort has to take that into consideration. You say, well, why are we still doing this? Again, I work at an architecture firm. 90% of the buildings we still build are cells and bells. I don't know if you've heard that expression before. You sit in the cell for an hour, the bell goes off, and you move to another cell. And that's because the cultures in these school districts and colleges and universities simply can't digest that much of a shift all at once. Could I come up with a great, and I have actually, and that's what happened at HCC, is that we came up with something that was so far ahead of the norm that it's getting snapped back now. And so that's one of the central challenges we face as futurists and technologists, is that tension between aspiration, again, on the one hand, and what actually works and what we can get people to digest. And I'm talking about, muggles here. And so we have to write a report that's both for us and for the muggles. And maybe that's 2 reports. Maybe that's 2 separate efforts. Maybe that looks different. Maybe one's a piece of paper and another's an ongoing thread on a website, and those are things that we really have to consider. We have to consider our audience as much as we consider ourselves, and the importance of our community and talking to each other.
These are all huge ideas. And, but before I press on that, let me ask if I could, for people who haven't had a chance to speak so far, Ruben, and again, if I'm mishearing you, please forgive, Jonathan, JJ, Roxanne, Vanessa, and Mark, I know often has bandwidth limitations, and he's been contributing very thoughtfully in the chat box. So please, if that's easier for you, go there. Are any of these shapes in particular really attract you, or that you'd like to expand on?
Yeah, for my part, I think there's a couple of interesting things that come to the table. In other words, we're talking about some type of a community effort. I agree, some type of crowdsourcing. One of the things that interests me, and of course, this couples with some of what Phil was writing up in the Google Doc, is a question of what does this look like in terms of how that ties in with community. In other words, I don't necessarily think that this needs to look like, okay, let's bring together the expertise of the community. Rather, to me, one of the interesting opportunities becomes, what if we talk about how whoever participates reacts to something that's not exactly on the landscape or not exactly on the, well, I foresee this as being particularly relevant, interesting, and so on. When I look at some of what came out of Horizon, particularly in terms out of how I myself participate in the Horizon process, part of it wasn't just, okay, surface what you already know, etc. That's the easy part. That's the more obvious part. But it was more the being taken in a sideswipe, if you will, by something I had not thought about, or say, oh wow, wait, how did I miss that, or how did I not get that?
Right.
And finding interesting things coming from that. So from my perspective, I have to be honest with you, my thoughts are right now going in 20 different directions at once, because I'm seeing really exciting possibilities. And from my perspective, I'd love to see, how we can harness some of that, some of the, not what I already had in mind, or, yes, I've been working on this for so many years, blah, blah, but whoa, no, I didn't think of that. And given everything else I know, what does that make me think of now? So just a thought in that regard.
Ruben, can I press on that thought for one particular point? Because that's one of the delights I have, and one of the reasons I believe so strongly in having a multi-person viewpoint and many, many conversations. In the Google Doc, and I think in Slack, we had a discussion about unitary versus plural outcomes. That is, the Horizon report, for example, took all these different inputs and distilled them into one document. The OCLC's Horizon Scanning Project did something similar. It took a lot of input and just swooped that down. And we had the question of, this is a classic weakness of Delphi, and in fact of publication in general, is you get groupthink, or you get or too much reliance on a popular or exciting opinion. So we're asking, should we publish minority reports? And Tom had some thoughts on that. Or should there be some kind of diverse, I hate to be so abstract, a diverse set of outcomes that come out of this work in general? I'm not sure that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think, I think that the diversity of outcomes, to me, is something we definitely want to keep in front of us, because again, it's interesting. The Horizon report was published, right? And that's what 99.99% of the users read. But one of the things I always told people when I worked with them using the Horizon report was, go back to the wiki. It's archived, and you can look at the discussions that took place. Look at some of the stuff that didn't make it into the report, right? From the options that were on the table, but look at the discussion around them, because it also became a question. Sometimes it's just a question of contextual, right? Say, well, okay, this for some fairly clear contextual reasons didn't come out in the report, but in your context, some of that discussion might be more relevant. But even with something like the Horizon project, because it archived the Delphi process, or the modified Delphi process, there was already at least the potential for this type of multiple product. I'm not sure exactly what they would look like for us, whether, it might be something like, as you say, the minority reports, or multiple different elements. But I think it'd be lovely to keep that on the table as a defining feature of what this looks like, that it's not just a single monolithic product and that's it, but rather something that has this multifaceted approach to it. And they can have, yes, the minority report, the contradictory report. Brian, you and I have talked extensively about the black swans and what can come out of that, which was done exactly once for the Horizon project, but could become much more a constitutive feature of something like this. So yeah, no, I think that multiple, that it's not just one product, but a multiplicity of products is something I would very much like to see us keep on the table.
Thank you. That's a very rich answer to my very shambling question. in the chat box, just want to make sure you guys see Mark Wilson links to a blog post of his. And if you don't know Mark, he's easily one of the best kept secrets of technology education in the future. A very, very deep and subtle thinker who will always push you way, way far ahead from wherever you're starting. Laura, if your mic is working, would you like to say more about this out loud? It'd be great to hear from you.
Yes, sure. Sorry, I was chasing a dog. Yeah, no, I think there's an opportunity to build on what was there with the Delphi process. And I think that the opportunities to give exemplars to practitioners, educators, instructors, or designers will look different than someone who's going to continue to research and investigate and explore it. So I like the idea, and I think in the documents, Stephen Downes actually said the idea of learning, training, and development actually broadens that further to getting other innovators from other sectors. So I'm a weird, unique scholar that intersects higher ed, meets learning and development in HR, meets information science. So like, where do we have those crossovers and explaining ideas to different populations that, like you said, it's not about the technology. It could be about the pedagogy, but it's really about the so what, or what the problem we're investigating and trying to solve. And framing the report around that instead of the tools is helpful for people, because then they can see where they best fit in and make an understanding a bit further. So yeah, there might be a showcase that is a podcast with some notes and things to read, or it could be something visual that's being demonstrated in short clips from bite-sized chunks on a video or multiple formats. We just have so many great opportunities to do that, I think.
Well said. And by the way, am I the only one here without a dog? I'm feeling left out and very sad. There's just puppies everywhere. I'm an animal person, so if you have animals, let them leap in the screen. I'm happy to see. Oh, look at that. Oh, hello, JJ. That's a fierce little poodle puppy. Oh, hello, Lisa. Hello, Jackson. Oh, awesome. Hello, Laura. Oh, this is great. Oh,
This is Charlie, the other dog.
Hello, Charlie. Oh, sorry, I'm a big mushroom. I think video conferencing is a field that's emerging in so many ways, and I really believe it should be as playful as possible. Just like Jackson trying to lick Lisa's face right off her head. Oh, this is fantastic. Laura, please, can I capture you and bronze you and put you at the center of all of our work? Because Laura, what you're talking about, all these different backgrounds is so vital and so unusual. That's awesome.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
you just did.
Yeah, I think I had mentioned that somewhere. I've kind of lost where I wrote that. Where I was saying that learning is learning. Learning also, and the strategies and the innovations, it extends out of the education arena, out of academia. And I think that's what Laura is saying. And somewhere I wrote, I mean, even businesses who are doing largely, using instructional designers and doing all sorts of training with video and all different things like that would be interested. And actually, I think it would add a richness to have input from also people who are outside of the academic environment. And that's one thing that, Horizon, you had Museum, which is also, it's still academic, but at least that kind of added another dimension to it. And then another thing, I've been trying to hold my breath since Maya went and was talking about relating it to the pedagogy. What I like is that if you get all these different ideas out, you need people who are like risk takers and willing to go with that type of an idea and try it in their teaching and in the learning and see whether or not it works. We need experimenters. We need to, what we were saying the other day, do it on the fly, pick up that idea and test it out, because we can make all these predictions, but if all along the way we don't have people who are willing to take that prediction and actually test it, well, then
Yeah.
it just goes away. It needs to go from the abstract to the concrete. As Maya's saying, it needs to be put into the pedagogy. And some people might give us stories of their failure and how it doesn't work and how it's not applicable. But then
counts.
other people might give us stories of success. But I like to see, specific examples rather than just abstract ideas too.
Well said. Peter, are you actually raising your hand, man? You just talk. I think you're muted though, Peter.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, years of conditioning there. One thing that in terms of emerging technologies that I've thought about is that if you really want to see where the interesting work is being done in terms of learning technology, and this is pivoting off of what Lisa said, look at those industries where people are being educated and trained to make life and death decisions. That's always where the cutting edge technology is being used because they don't want to risk anything else. That's where simulations and other things like that have found the most fertile ground.
I agree. I'm my wife. I haven't mentioned my wife teaches emergency response, and she started teaching the class. She flipped the classroom, redesigned it. I need to write about this, and she needs to write about it. But that's a case where it was always literally just in time teaching to save someone from death or injury. Friends, I hate to be the party pooper, but in about 3 minutes, Zoom will stop this unless I pay them $2,000. It's kind of like this, like really, really sweet racket. Let me just hold here for a second and try and get my arms around everything people are saying. I'm thinking, heat maps, scatter plots, matrices. We seem to be talking about a really, really complex at least three-dimensional space with, as Lisa pointed out, the abstract, the potential, as well as the concrete practitioners, right? Where we have all these different possible nodes, all these different, nodes and edges, as Mark put it. I mean, it's easy to think of it as a visualization. I'm striving to think about how that works as a shape for what we do. Maybe what we do is we have a kind of ongoing matrix of the future of education, the future of learning and technology, and it's stuffed full of all these different points. And out of that springs different narratives. Vanessa pointed out, she had this great phrase, internal reports between futurists. And that's where we could have not minority reports, but they'd all be minority reports. They'd all be taking different pieces of this. I'm really fatigued, and I could just be hallucinating at this point. But that's in place. One spot where I'm headed. There's 2 minutes left. What else do you think, friends, about shapes? Have we reached some consensus for you? Have you gotten an idea? What else do you want to leave us with before we go? Oh, I hope I wasn't muted. It'd be dead embarrassing if it were.
No, you were. We heard you. So no, I guess we're being too reflective for our own good.
Maybe so.
It sounds, Brian, like that I think that we all value the participation of the community, and that will be key, and that will be a focal point. And then we have to get better at catching these streams that will turn into minority reports.
Capture.
And that will turn into a community of practice, to bring the example.
Yes.
That
Back
will
to community.
turn into the visual and the video and everything. So, and I think that in between there, we started with the community, and then these streams probably will end up being in the hands of a small community, and then back to the community in a way to shape up the practice. So that's my sort of way to.
That's beautiful. And Maya is the architect here. Tomorrow we're heading into scope and audience. And I think we are now really, really well poised to just advance forward. I never say advance to Thursday with such delight, but I think we can take all this great thinking and start pouring it into shapes of containers, scope, and into some sense of audience. We're heading towards product.
I have one word for you: federated 2 words: federated structure. And look at the idea that I have on the blog entry to talk about how do we get all these inputs and manage them, and people being able to do their own thing. Sorry.
Check that out. Thank you all. This has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much. My best to all of your puppies.
Yes.
We'll see you online, and we can talk
Bye
tomorrow.
all.
Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
Goodbye.
Bye.
JJ, it's all captured. The chat is saved, and the video and audio should be saved as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. See you tomorrow.
Bye.